So I know that I have a... Oh, no. Don't make me blush. You can clap if you like my talk. So hi there. Welcome to my talk. I'm going to try and stay within the allotted time because I know there's a big announcement following me, so I don't want to cannibalize any of their time. Let me just try out if I'm going in the right direction with this. Here we go. All right. So, welcome to my talk, Building a Solid Foundation for a Game Startup, the Valuable Lessons I've Learned from Working with Nordic Game Startups. Technically, that's worldwide game startups, but because I only have 20 minutes, I had to kind of reduce it to a specific region. But there's a reason for that, and you'll find that out later in the talk. So, just a quick disclaimer. Some of this stuff you might not like, or might not sound like something you can do. But like Shakespeare once wisely said, nothing is good or bad, only thinking makes it so. So try to keep an open mind, right, when you're dealing with the topics that I'm going to address. So who's a game developer in the audience? Like, who actually wants to make games or is already making games? Just raise your hands. All right, so we got. All right, so who's actually like setting up a company to make games? Okay, cool. So this talk is for you and anybody who wants to consider that. None of us really are ready when we decide to do these kind of things. I love this graph because I've lived this multiple times in my life. I've had 2.5 burnouts because of this graph, and I'm still standing, fortunately. And when it comes to making video games, obviously we'd love to make a game and launch it, but there is something else that comes with that, which is we end up realizing, oh snap, we're running a company, we've got employees, we need to figure out how to pay them, and what happens if our game fails, right? So, and there's a ton of talks on this topic online. One of them I love to link to is featured on the GDC YouTube channel for the Game Developers Conference, biggest game conference in the world. A lot of free talks on their YouTube channel. I can highly recommend checking that out. So, who am I? Who's this hairy guy on stage who forgot to shave? Well, this is me. My name's Vlad. I do biz dev. I've worked on mobile, PC, console, all kinds of stuff. Some successful, some less successful. But who knows who I'm dressed up like? Where's that movie from? No, you don't count, Kate. Like, so tell me, what movie is this from? Who was that? Who said it first? Okay, you win a prize. Congratulations. Come get your prize. I have 20 minutes, so I'm going to put it down here. It's Grand Inquisitor from Star Wars Obi-Wan. There you go. Congratulations. All right, cool. Awesome. I love it when people recognize my cosplay. So that was at San Diego Comic-Con in the US. So I've been in the industry quite some time. I've mostly been working in the background, but aside from all of the stupid numbers that are there, I am kind of an amateur ethnographer, and I love to kind of like figure out how game communities work all around the world. And also, you know, amateur anthropologist, because it's very interesting what we do in our little community of introverts in video games. So these are kind of like a few of the companies I've worked with. Random, you might recognize some, you might not. Some of these developers that are on there have made amazing games, but they might have not promoted their companies as well as their games, so you might know them, you might not. But Vlad, what do you do? I get that question quite often. So I've tried to summarize that in 3 things. I save people time. I try to save them money and help them make money instead of losing any. And I build and maintain relationships for them worldwide, which is a full-time job on its own, right? So this is actually a very outdated graph. This is from 2016. So all these numbers are actually outdated already by, like, I think, everything you can double, I think, by now in terms of what the Nordic countries have in terms of employees. I think Finland right now has about 7,000 industry people. I think Norway grew by about 50%. Iceland is doubled as well. Denmark definitely has doubled or tripled. And Sweden has doubled as well. Some recent updates from the Nordic area. By the way, one of my favorite regions of game development. That's why I'm giving this talk. You can see that there's been some recent developments. Rovio, creators of Angry Birds, you know, Sega's looking at them. I think that acquisition is still in the process of being done. We're seeing new venture capital come up from Sweden. Embracer Group hasn't had the best of times and are shrinking their activities right now. And yeah, amazing indie developers like Ghost Ship Games are expanding into publishing after having a great success with Deep Rock Galactic. So let's go on about the startup stuff, right? I'm not sure if you've watched the South Park episode. It's a pretty good episode about startups. Cartman kind of giving it a satirical twist to what it means to actually run a like a company in general, or a startup. But I personally love to kind of always shrink stuff down to like the most simple elements. And what I've always loved is the fact that it all starts with a great team. It starts with, you know, a cohesive group of people on the same wavelength that complement each other's skills and want to do awesome stuff. And that hopefully results in great tech, a great product, and of course that product will require a good fit with the market that you're trying to launch it in, right? And of course, usually when you're at the stage of trying to create awareness and raise funding, a great deck presentation really helps. So it's interesting because when you look at what it takes to build a team, we see a lot of game companies that, especially in the Eastern European, maybe even the Central Asian area, have usually one boss, one founder, one person who owns it all. But when you look at the more Nordic approach, it really reflects almost the kind of Silicon Valley approach where, for example, Guy Kawasaki in his awesome book, The Art of the Start, second version, I think the third version is on its way, mentions, you know, usually it's 3 people. And in Finland nowadays, there's even startups that have 16 founders, which is crazy. You're like, how does that work, right? That's designed by committee, as they call it. It's, how can you make decisions that way? Well, apparently they can, right? So when you're going to end up talking with some of the investors here, or maybe the guys from the Games Fund over there, right? One of the questions you're going to get is like, okay, but like, how are you going to stand out? I don't like the term unique selling point. I like to look at unfair advantage. Like, what is it that you have that people can't replicate or steal or copy anytime soon, right? Which I love that picture. Like, that's, for me, the perfect picture to showcase that. So, you know, you're going to get that question a lot. And sometimes it's something that you might notice right away, which might only show itself in a pivot. When you realize, like, okay, what we initially designed or made doesn't work, but we might have developed something in the process that we can use in our next project, and that's going to be our unfair advantage. So we have something in Europe which is specifically like known in the Nordics, which is called the demo scene. Who knows what the demo scene is? Okay, so there we go. We actually have some demo sceners here, actually, I just realized. So in the 80s, a lot of us in Europe got access to our first computers, usually through our parents who started using them for work. And what organically kind of happened was that young people that had access to the early Commodore and Amiga systems that back then were available, or Mac, started coding, started teaching themselves, you know, how to do stuff. And it was always about one very important thing, because the memory on these machines was very limited. How to optimize our code, how to optimize our little programs that made amazing 3D animations, and people still do this on those same machines from the 80s till this day, right? I definitely highly recommend that you type in demo scene someday and look on YouTube what people made more than 40 years ago on these old systems with 64 Ks of memory, I believe. Yeah, that was about accurate. So that's kind of the basis of what happened in the Nordics. But when I look at the specific countries, one thing I love about, for example, Sweden, right, which is known for a lot of different games, is their commercial pragmatism. So the idea that we live in our country, we have our own culture, we have our own history, but anything we make needs to appeal to a global audience. Now that's a topic that Kate's going to delve into deeper, so I'm going to keep that very basic. But I think that we can all agree that the Swedes have kind of succeeded with stuff like Candy Crush and Battlefield, you know, Little Nightmares, Minecraft, of course, who doesn't know Minecraft? And I can highly recommend checking out the Spelcollectiviteit, which is a communal workplace, like a place where you can go as a game developer and work and live in the Swedish forest while doing so. Check it out. It's kind of like Ololo, but in the forest. So the Finnish, and we've actually had this discussion among us speakers yesterday, have something called sisu. Sisu is hard to translate. The word is impossible to translate, but I would say the best way to look at it is the word resilience. It's such important for their culture that they even made a movie about it recently, which I can highly recommend, if you like, you know, violent movies. But it also kind of reflects in what happened in their industry. So, for example, who knows the game Gunshine? It was an isometric shooter on Facebook. That was the first game that Supercell ever made before Clash and Clash Royale and all that other stuff, and it failed. But, you know, they persevered, and we all know what happened next. Rovio, even, was a 100-person company in 2008, making games for, like, the mobile phones back then. Something went wrong. They went back to 10 people. The iPhone came out. They made Angry Birds, and the rest is history. And there's many other examples like that, but I don't have time to go through all of them. Also, it helps that they have a sauna culture where shame is not a big issue. Like, a culture without shame helps. It's a very trust-bonding experience to sit in a banya together. I guess, you know, that's the thing you guys have over here. And you know, Native Americans, of course, have their sweat lodge. And it's a trust-building experience to sit in a sweaty, hot place. And of course, the transparency and the mutual trust that they have also helps. So another thing that I really appreciated about the Nordic community is that every successful company kind of helped them set new standards for their community. I feel like D-Billions is kind of in the process of doing the same thing for the region here by kind of setting up, you know, specific vocabulary and standards of like how to run a business. You know, these are some words that I didn't know before like 2014 and never used. So my question to you is, have you ever used any of these words in your business conversations, in your pitch, in, you know, your daily dealings trying to run your game and trying to run your game company? If not, then start looking into that, because that's the kind of conversations I have on a daily basis with publishers, with investors, and with game developers that I work with, right? Support system. So I know the topic of mental health might not be arranged very often, like might not be discussed very often in this region, but it's definitely a topic that I feel, regardless of where you live in the world, needs to be addressed. And so for me, when you're doing the stuff you're doing, when you're creating a business, when you're creating a game, it's so important to have a healthy support system that consists of multiple elements like I feature here, right? Yeah, tons of books as well. So, to add to that, I think one of the most important elements for especially the younger folks among us is try to find people who've done it before, because you would be surprised, despite the fact that games are changing constantly, how the same steps that you're taking in your business have already been done by others. So, you know, I think this picture kind of illustrates it the most. I've been through so much, and I'd like to say I can't be surprised by my daily dealings and by people, but I still am, both good and bad. So find those people around you and cherish them. Most importantly, the most important people that you can talk to right now are the people sitting left and right of you. So if you haven't spoken to those people and you don't know them, say hi, because I can't tell you how many times I sat next to someone at a talk like this and said hi, and they ended up becoming very valuable contacts and potential partners, right? So the topics of failure and adversity are constantly being handled in the Nordics. I don't see them handled everywhere else the same way. And I encourage you, even if it's in a personal conversation between two people, between you and someone else, to address them. And try to fully foster your region and your community of peers doing so. So I just gave you a very short and quick talk about the Nordic region. And I just want to ask you to just take a moment and think about, what if I spend the same amount of time I spend in the Nordics in your region? What would this talk look like? What would you like me to have in there? What would you like me not to have in there, and why? Right? Because we're going to reach that point where either one of you or myself is going to be talking about Central Asia on stage, outside of Central Asia, right? So then just take a moment to think about that. And like a good friend of mine once said, talent is equally distributed, not equally represented. And I'm personally ashamed that up until recently, when I found out about the Central Asian Game Show, I gave your region 0 attention. And I admit that. And I'm ashamed of that because, in my opinion, it's too late. But on the other side, I'm one of the lucky people who now knows what you guys are doing, what's happening, what's going to be announced after my talk. And I feel privileged for having that. So these are my contact infos, but I'm going to be around all day. I don't have time for questions on stage because I know there's important stuff following me. So if you want to talk more, look me up. I mean, I'm not that hard to find. So that's it. Thank you.